Good morning, everybody. The Simple Handicap for Wednesday, November 6th. Thank you for making me a part of your morning. I appreciate you guys dealing with the absence yesterday that kept me away from the podcast feed. We got blasted by a storm on Monday. Came off the coast with heavy winds, big rain, and we just lost power, and we were in a complete blackout for the majority of the day. I was not in a position to record. It carried over into yesterday morning as well. We didn't get power back till about 8:30 in the morning. It was just tough to get through. Internet and cell connection was touch and go, and so we're back. Everything's back to normal. Weather's cleared up a bit, and it's timely because we have the Wednesday morning live stream, as always, on the RAS Picks YouTube channel with the Q&A going through every game on the board. And thank goodness, it's a bye week. We got 4 teams on the bye. That'll keep the episode a little bit shorter as well. Allow us to focus in on a few games and take some more questions. So if you want to watch that, 12 p.m. Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific on the RAS Picks YouTube channel. If you're watching here on YouTube this morning, hope to have you on the live stream in a few hours. If you're watching on Apple or Spotify, or you're listening on your way to work or walking the dog or getting ready for a big Wednesday, would love to have you over on the live stream as well. Let's get to the first market rundown for this Wednesday morning. Things kick off tomorrow with the Cincinnati Bengals on the road at the Baltimore Ravens. Late night action yesterday. About 9:30 p.m. Eastern time, we saw some Ravens money hit the market. This was as low as 5.5. It was a bit expected to see that number on Cincinnati Sunday night at 6.5 get taken. But the news of T. Higgins, unlikely to play in this game on Thursday, is impactful, as is the news that Keaton Mitchell is going to return for the Baltimore Ravens. That is such a dynamic speed and explosive presence to add into this backfield for an offense that is trending at a historic pace. This is going to be a big problem for defense between Henry, Mitchell, and Hill. The Ravens and Monken just have so many weapons at their disposal, and that's not counting getting Deontay Johnson involved as well, who they acquired last week from the Carolina Panthers. This offense is going to continue to be a problem, and I don't see how the Bengals have an answer in this matchup. We're seeing the total get bet up because the Bengals basically have the season on the line to an extent here in this divisional rematch, a game that they absolutely have to keep everything alive. You know that they're going up firing with their offense. Defense has been struggling for the majority of the season, so the total at 53 has been bet up with one-way action on the over. I get it. I'm just really cooled on that stance that I might be intrigued by Cincinnati as the dog that I was initially thinking I would have on Sunday night, as this starting to look like a Baltimore Ravens team that's just in a bit of a runaway trajectory. More to come on this game as we look at some of those Hill prop prices, along with Mitchell coming up in the next 24 hours and what we're going to get and how the market's going to handle it. I think that's going to be a very intriguing storyline in this game. New York Giants facing off against the Carolina Panthers in Germany, the Munich game. This is a game that has honestly surprised me from a betting standpoint. We were out this morning to the Giants as a 6-point favorite at Chris Circa and Buckeye. The rest of the market following suit. Total down from 42 to 41.5. I say I'm surprised by it because it is a neutral field. There's no home field advantage. And the Giants looked very disappointing last week against Washington. And it was a coach interview coming out of the tunnel that really put the state of the Giants into clear view, where Brian Daboll was content with how the offense was handling things. Daniel Jones had -5 yards at the time he did the interview. And so I'm surprised to see the Giants get so much love in this game. And it makes me wonder what I'm missing in this spot. I don't quite know the answer to that. I know the Giants leave Thursday night and they're going directly into practice Friday morning. I haven't seen Panthers travel plans yet. My week has been turned upside down, losing Monday and just scrambling to play catch up. So if I did miss something about the Panthers, if you are watching on YouTube, would love to know in the comment section down below. Looked through a bunch of sources yesterday, couldn't find it. And so I'm curious to know if that's playing into it. Carolina has a ton of guys in the IR return to play practice window. I don't understand why some of these guys who are eligible are not getting pushed back into play. With the bye on deck, potentially there's anticipation that activations happen this week, but guys won't play, and then the bye gets everyone acclimated for the stretch run down the end of the season to see maybe if the Panthers get a couple of wins. I just feel like the way the Panthers have handled injury situations with offensive and defensive starters is a little bit off, too. And so considering they had a selling mindset coming into the deadline, that could be viewed as a negative in this spot as well. The Giants are certainly going to be able to run the ball against this Panthers front. But to me, man, I'm just surprised to see there be no resistance against the Giants in this spot. I mean, we're thinking about last week where the Saints were at 7. And like we're pushing past that with the Giants in a neutral here at this price point. Um, very surprised to see it. Very surprised to see it. Buffalo on the road at the Indianapolis Colts. Bills 4-point favorites across the board with a total of 46. I like the Colts side in this game, getting 4 points as an underdog. Talked about it yesterday with Mitch and Paulie on VSiN. I think this is a spot where we see Shane Steichen after kind of an embarrassing Sunday night performance against the Vikings in terms of the game plan that he put forth, get things right. I think we see the Colts offense perform to that level that was expected, that the market respected last week with Joe Flacco starting at quarterback. I think we see a better game from Taylor and perhaps Pittman trending back to a little bit closer to 100% more involved in the offense. But what surprised me on Sunday night and stood out was the defensive performance. Now you're getting back to everybody healthy except Brents. There was some push up front that we haven't seen from the Colts defense in quite some time. It still wasn't dominant. It still wasn't great, but in the Bills here on the road with the Chiefs on deck coming off of a tight and competitive game against the Dolphins, I do feel like the spot here for the Colts sets up pretty well too. And so this was a game I talked about yesterday on Follow the Money and a side that I like going into Sunday. Minnesota on the road at the Jacksonville Jags. Not a lot of movement in this one over the last 36 hours. This is still Minnesota -4 across the board with a total of 47. Pittsburgh on the road at the Washington Commanders. Total from 44 got to 46. Resistance at 46, pulling this back now to 45.5. Kind of saw a clear buy point on the over and a clear buy point coming back on the under. When it comes to the side, there was a release from a professional on Monday on the Washington Commanders at -2.5 that pushed this out to 3. That is where we are still holding this morning with Washington, a very soft 3. The Commanders acquire Lattimore from the Saints, which I think is a very impactful trade for them, considering the weakness they have in the secondary. They're looking at this as a season where they can make a run into the playoffs, and St. Juste isn't going deep into the playoffs as your cornerback number 1. So if they can integrate Lattimore into this defense, I think that's a really nice fit. On the other side, Pittsburgh makes an acquisition of their own, getting Mike Williams from the Jets. Not as optimistic that that's a big impact signing. They basically just added a lesser version and an older version and a more injured version of George Pickens, opposite of George Pickens. It certainly fits the mold for receivers that Russ could have success throwing to, but I don't know, based on the performance with the Jets, how much you're getting out of Mike Williams this season. Now, it's an intriguing Steelers offense to me, and one at +3 that I would be willing to back this week on the road in Washington against the opinion of the other pro that pushed this up, as I'm looking at a Steelers defense that's the toughest test for the Commanders in this game, but a Commanders offense that's the toughest test for the Steelers defense. If those two offset, the unit that can win here is the Steelers offense, which has gone 6.2 and 6.8 yards per play in the 2 games with Russell Wilson, and they get a lesser quality defense than what they have faced with Russ in both of these spots. And then, of course, you have Tomlin back in his natural role as an underdog, where the Steelers are much better to back than him laying a big point spread. And so this is a spot here where I think the Steelers do get bet at 3, and this number comes back off of the 3 as the week goes on. But I do like the Steelers and the field goal in this matchup. Atlanta on the road at the New Orleans Saints. Falcons 3.5, a soft 3.5 across the board, 3 -20. The price at Chris -125 at Circa. You can get 3.5 -120 on the Saints at home. Coach is out, as anticipated Sunday night in the podcast. Dennis Allen is no longer the head coach. Rizzi steps in, the special teams coordinator, who is now the head coach, and everything we've heard from him is pretty typical interim head coach talk. You're getting a lot more intensity. The focus is on just a lot of like the traditional rah-rah coach stepping in, trying to make a good impression. I actually think that that's a good thing for the Saints at the moment and something that they're going to benefit from, especially on defense in this game. The big issue for the Saints all season has been the defense, the inability to tackle, the weakness at stopping the run. If you get kind of an injection of life and energy at the head coach spot, and especially coming after the defensive leader, and Dennis Allen, who's been there for years, is removed, could see that as a bit of a positive in a one-game standalone size against a division opponent. And so if you get a heightened effort from that Saints defense, The Falcons, likely without Drake London, their number one wide receiver, you might have a chance at slowing down the run game for the Falcons, which was a big problem in the first meeting between these two teams. Now, on the other side, Derek Carr should be very comfortable in the pocket. This is not a Falcons defense that generates a lot of pressure, and even down Olave and Shaheed, it's a spot where I think Derek Carr can have success throwing the football matched up against this Falcons defense. And so I am intrigued to see if there is that new coaching bump that gets bet in the market. We haven't really seen it yet. It's one that I have bet myself, but I'm curious to see if we get a bit of Saints movement as the week goes on. I think it's deserving in this matchup. Denver on the road at the Kansas City Chiefs. Chiefs from 9 down to a soft 8 across the board. Total from 43 down to 41.5, trending a little bit lower. Patrick Mahomes with the mild ankle sprain. It's incredible that he plays through what looks like another brutal injury. Didn't seem to impact him as he didn't miss any time in that game on Monday Night Football against the Bucs. It's a short week for the Chiefs, but it's another spot where the Broncos are stepping up in class. And we saw what happened against the Ravens. You can give a bit of a caveat and say, hey, look, Broncos had a lot of near misses deep in the Ravens' territory, sure, but this is now a much more difficult defense in the Chiefs than what they faced last week in the Baltimore Ravens. So that run game that the Broncos love to lean on that opens up their offense, it's not going to be there against the Chiefs. I think that's a big advantage in this Broncos defense against a good offense. We saw what happened last week as the Ravens went up and down the field for 41 points. Did the Chiefs get to 41? No, I don't think so, but tough task stopping Patrick Mahomes, who now looks like he has a real wide receiver number one on the other side of Travis Kelce in DeAndre Hopkins, emerging as a big threat in the middle portion of the season. San Francisco on the road at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. This opened 6, and it was a strong 6. We're now down to flat 5 across the board. 49ers off of the bye. We'll hear later today if McCaffrey is back, if Debo is back. Could be a spot where the 49ers are getting a lot of guys back. And I think about this matchup against the Bucs. Tampa Bay in the 2 weeks since the Godwin and Evans injuries have faced opponents where the style of play shifting to 2 backs and 2 tight ends could set up for success against both the Falcons and then against the Chiefs. For Kansas City, it's a big weakness that the Chiefs have had all season defending those positions, and Tampa Bay exploited it quite well. I am surprised to see against an opponent who's much better equipped to defend it that the Buccaneers initially are getting bet at home. And there is some noise in the 49ers numbers as they're dealing with a number of injuries and guys are in and out of the lineup. But there is a chance out of the bye that this is the healthiest we've seen the 49ers in quite some time. And so I have a hard time looking at this number if McCaffrey is in, who allegedly has a chance, an outside chance at one, to play in this game, and you get Samuel back and you have a relatively healthy offense and defense. Perhaps Jennings could return as well. Like, I have a hard time imagining the 49ers not getting bet, but I saw a tweet yesterday that said that there were 88 players who are identified as ones that would have impact to fantasy teams on the injury report this week. This is going to be a messy Wednesday and Thursday for injuries, and the 49ers are at the forefront of it on both sides of the football. And so, waiting to see, but similar to New York, Carolina, I am intrigued as to why the Bucs, like the Giants, have been bet almost immediately since open, and there hasn't been a lot of resistance against it. Pretty surprising for me to see that. New England on the road at the Chicago Bears. This got as low as 5.5 before the Bears took a little bit of money back. This was as high as 7 at open for Chicago. There was a release from a service that took out the 7s on New England. A lot of the 6.5s went shortly after. We're now down to an adjusted 6 for Chicago. Injuries on the O-line, injuries in the secondary, benchings in the secondary, and somewhat of an injury to the QB. Although I don't think the Caleb Williams injury is going to be one that impacts his status for the game. We'll find out a little bit later today, but certainly a lot of names to watch on both sides. Don't really have a strong opinion in what we're getting from this game. I will say if this comes off of the 6 and you're starting to trend into the 5s, I would expect Chicago to have an advantage on the ground against the Pants' run defense, which has really struggled. If there's these rumors of Bears players on both sides of the football quitting effectively, DJ Moore had another interview on Monday this week, and he didn't deny that the locker room was lost by Eberflus. This is something that goes back a week earlier. If that is a constant and there's truth to that, tough to say the Bears should be laying this big of a number. But if you're looking at this game and that's not the case and you get an effort from the Bears like we saw in a similar spot at home against the Carolina team, for instance, that really struggles against the run, this sets up to be a spot where you would probably expect the Bears, if this gets below 6, to be bet between now and Sunday. Tennessee on the road at the LA Chargers. The Chargers are a 7.5-point home favorite. Total from 38 down to 37.5 at Chris, showing 37.5 at FanDuel as well. A couple 8s have flickered on the screen over the last 2 days. Hasn't been much to it in terms of holding. We have a wide range of numbers internally on this one that range between 7 and 9.5, and so the number looks to be priced relatively well. Some internal comments that the number should be higher, and this is going to be impacted by a lot of the injuries for Tennessee. There was a beat reporter that covers the Titans that said this is going to be the longest injury report for the Titans of the entire season. And so not only are you looking for names at quarterback, you're looking at the O-line. We know Cushenberry is on IR. Also, Quandre Diggs is placed on IR. So already this week, the Titans have lost their starting center and their safety. Snead is also out. We don't know his status for this game. There's other depth pieces at the D-line and linebacker who are banged up as well. You don't want to be an injured team going cross-country after an overtime game and a win at home to take on this Chargers team that's playing so well and is so buttoned up, down a lot of key starters in a bit of a QB limbo situation. And so injury reports going to have an impact on this point spread for sure. Philadelphia on the road at the Dallas Cowboys. We're looking at the Eagles as a soft 7.5-point favorite on the road. Total from 48.5 all the way down from the initial reopen of 45, now to as low as 41.5 this morning at FanDuel and Heritage. It's been one-way money on the under since the reopen, which was already adjusted down. Dak Prescott is on IR. CeeDee Lamb seems 50-50 at best to play in this game. All eyes on the injury report are on Micah Parsons and Trayvon Diggs. If both guys can play in this game, and then A.J. Brown for the Eagles, who is, I think, 50-50 at best at this point in the week, does not go, I do think we see the Cowboys get bet as the bigger home dog in this spot. I don't believe that the drop from Prescott to Rush is as big as it used to be. This used to be one of the bigger QB to backup drop-offs in the league. But with Prescott's reduced mobility and this offense as a whole just really struggling, I think the drop-off is reduced. And so this right now, if we think about the look-ahead price, which was 3, is now up to a soft 7.5. It's a pretty big number that you can't just go from a straight counting perspective as you're crossing 4, 5, 6, and 7, all important numbers in today's NFL betting. To get to that 7.5, it's still pricing the drop-off like years past. Now, a lot of that is attributed to CeeDee Lamb, who's been the main offensive weapon, obviously, for the Cowboys not being in this game. If Prescott and Lamb miss and Parsons does not return and Diggs does not return, okay, I get it. I think 7.5 is justified. But if you start seeing some of these names for Dallas ruled in, it's really going to depend on the status of A.J. Brown. There's so much willingness, I feel, in the market from other bettors, from other pros, to want to fade the Eagles. It may not be this week. It could very well be next Thursday against the Commanders, where the Eagles are installed as short road favorites of a field goal on the look-ahead lines. If you think about Washington potentially struggling with Pittsburgh, the Eagles, if they get A.J. Brown back and the Cowboys have all of these guys out and the Eagles run up the game where they can front run and comfortably get away with a victory again, I think what we're going to see really early Sunday night, perhaps even right at the open, as we start to see some of these books pop, if you're getting like an adjusted number up to 4 or so on the Eagles on the road at Washington, you're going to see those taken out pretty quickly. And so it feels like it's mounting where there is going to be a pretty big sell on Philadelphia in the market. Don't know if it's going to be this week because of the injuries for the Cowboys, but even with so much uncertainty on both sides, we are seeing the Cowboys at least get bet a little bit here in the middle portion of the week. New York Jets on the road at the Arizona Cardinals. Cardinals 1-point favorites across the board. Total 46. We talked about this on the Sunday live stream when this opened 44. I was like, this is setting up for an over. It's now at 46. I wouldn't be running to play the over at 46. I do think both offenses have success, but I am curious to see if the Jets keep on taking money. I like the Jets in this game, Talked about it again on Follow the Money with Mitch and Paulie. Very likely my Sam P pick. I don't want to give a spoiler. I want everybody to watch those videos, but it is the side that I'm looking at for that best bet in addition to Indy and New Orleans this week. Looking at the Jets here as a 1-point dog on the road. Last couple of weeks, getting Wilson back with confidence, Adams emerging in the offense. I think it's a unit that's trending in the right direction, and they get a matchup here against the Cardinals that just sets up so well for what they want to do offensively. I am worried about the Cardinals' ground game and their heavier personnel just wreaking havoc against the Jets' defensive front. I think there's a very clear path there for Arizona to move the football. But if the Jets can win just some at a time with their corners and get off the field, I really think the Jets are going to show their best offensive performance of the season in this spot. And so the fact that they're still getting the point here as the underdog, and this was a game that was at a pick 'em on the look ahead, don't fully agree with that, as I think Arizona benefited from the Bears kind of quitting in that spot last week to make them look better than they actually are. Detroit on the road at Houston, Sunday Night Football, a game we talked about a lot on Sunday evening. Major reopen was 4.5. There were some rogue 5s. Those are all gone. This got down as low as 3 before Lions money came back yesterday morning. The addition of Smith, I think, is big for the Lions. They desperately needed a pass rusher to replace Hutchinson. Smith is not going to be at his level, but he's just the presence that they needed. I think that's a big addition to the Lions that's going to really make a difference for their defense, which was starting to show the signs of struggle. As we talk about those 80-plus players on the injury report, I'd argue that Nico Collins' status is right up there in the top 2 or 3 most impactful. If he is on the field and gets in a full week of practice for the Texans, and they also have Anderson and Al-Shaair back, I do think the 3.5s are worth of a bet. We don't know what we're looking at yet from the injury report status. It's been non-committal on Monday and Tuesday so far from Texans staff and Texans reporter. If they're back, this is a spot where it looks pretty good for a Texans reset off of the extra time to prep and the Lions coming in at their peak price relative to where they've been all season in terms of market ratings. But you're kind of handcuffed here based on what we're seeing from the injury report till you get a little bit more news. But I do expect if you see those guys ruled in, especially Collins, we see at some point between now and kickoff a bet coming in on the Houston Texans. And then Monday Night Football, it's the Miami Dolphins on the road at the LA Rams. Rams a 2.5 -15 favorite at Chris, 10 at Circa, and Buckeye 50 is the total. Was a little bit higher, as around 51.5 on the total before under money came in. We're now seeing as low as 49.5 this morning at Chris. A game I'm going to save for a little bit for later, one we'll talk about on the live stream preview, and one that we'll definitely dive into here on the podcast, as I expect we might have some involvement in it later this week. That'll do it for me today. Have a fantastic Wednesday, everybody. Hope to see you on the live stream today at 12 p.m. Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific. Enjoy your day, and we'll talk to you a little bit later.